Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme we shall be discussing Donald Trump's extraordinary executive order that's entitled Eradicating Anti-Christian Bias, where he is determined to protect Christian freedoms in the US. And in this programme today I'm joined by Helen Spiby from the Christian People's Alliance. Hello Helen. And also Melanie Symonds, the editor of Heart newspaper. So ladies, welcome to the programme. I'll start off with you, Melanie, because you have a new edition of Heart newspaper which is all about the Holocaust. Do you want to share with us a little bit about some of the articles and some of your heart between the focus that you've given the February-March edition of Heart newspaper?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's not all about the Holocaust, but obviously I always pray about the cover story and what the Lord wants. And we were coming up to Holocaust Memorial Day, and I really felt that the Lord wanted to challenge the church in Britain about our attitude to the Jewish people. And thanks to your article on Auschwitz in the latest Our Times, I had access to that, and also this new survey which shows that a majority of people who've been surveyed across Europe think a Holocaust could happen again because they see the amount of bias and ignorance, and that's quite alarming. And I really felt the Lord was quite stern in wanting that. But there's other things in the paper as well. Talking about is the C of E in crisis. General Synod's meeting now, and the head of Anglican Mainstream has written a piece on that. We've got a piece on local democracy and the councils postponing their elections, and we've got some prophecies for 2025 which are focusing a bit on American, but a couple of words for Britain as well. And there's a wonderful testimony about a man who found that Jesus met him in his bedsit when he was down and out in Southend.
Wonderful, wonderful, and thank you for featuring me, very kind of you. And Helen, do you want to give us an update on the work of the Christian People's Alliance, and what have you been up to during the past month?
Thank you so much, Simon. Well, we've got some exciting news from Christian People's Alliance. We have a candidate standing in a Westminster election. It's a local election in Vincent Square ward, and she's standing on the principles of Christian freedoms of expression, parental rights and family hubs, to mention a few. We've also got one of our amazing candidates from Plymouth who's actually, she's started a Christian action group in Dorset. They're staging protests outside Bournemouth Town Hall in favour of Adam Smith Connor, who was prosecuted for silent prayer outside abortion clinics. And what's really grabbing people's attention is that the local authority has actually spent over £100,000 on prosecuting him. So it's absolutely ridiculous.
No, absolutely. So, Melanie, we're talking about Donald Trump, and in particular during his election campaign, he actually promised that he would protect Christian liberties that had come under severe attack under the Biden-Harris administration, with incredibly progressive, woke ideas that he actually refers to in his executive order as the weaponization of government against Christians. But what do you make of him signing the executive order last week entitled Eradicate Christian Bias, which is an incredible document?
Anti-Christian bias. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. The fact that he's called this out, it's refreshing. It's actually hard to believe because he is using the language that our campaigning organisations have been using for years, anti-Christian bias, really calling it out. But he's doing this from the very pinnacle of government. And what it tells me is that he's been working on this stuff. He hasn't just been sitting in Mar-a-Lago all these years sunning himself and defending himself in court. He's been sort of getting all this, what Boris Johnson would have called an oven-ready plan, ready to go, and working out his cabinet, working out these executive orders. I mean, people talk about, assessing a president's first 100 days. Well, it's his first 100 minutes or first 100 hours. He's doing so much.
No, it's been absolutely sensational. And Helen, share with us why protecting Christian freedoms in the US is so important for President Trump, and how this is really the centre of his vision for the United States and his presidency.
Yes, I absolutely agree with what Melanie said, and I believe that he has a sincere faith, and we know that sincere faith comes with actions. and he's certainly getting on with a lot of important things, especially to protect Christian freedoms. He's starting a task force, which perhaps people have talked about this, but he's actually getting on with it to protect Christian freedoms. And he's also known to have said that religious liberty comes from God rather than the government, and that shows how much he honours God's way of doing things. He recognises that God is in the picture. I guess he's also thinking about the Pilgrim Fathers that founded the America that we have today, the United States, and certainly putting his faith on the table when it comes to this new task force. He talks about upholding the most fundamental rights, and I think he's referring to the First Amendment, and I just thought it would be worth sharing what that says.
Absolutely.
And he, as the President, does have the power to uphold this and to see that the law is implemented. So this is actually what the First Amendment in the law says. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And he's leaning on this with his executive orders. An executive order is not something that you sort of write a new law. He's actually leaning on the existing laws and emphasising them and making sure that the way they're implemented is in keeping with their original intention. Of course, his adversaries will see it differently. They will accuse him of abusing his power to be targeting people in a bigoted way. But, you know, the thing about America is that it recognises there's no such thing as impartiality. Everybody comes with their views, and I think that's a really important distinction that we see in America.
Well done for now. Good bit of research there, Helen. Thank you. And Melanie, I'm just going to read out this the opening paragraph of Donald Trump's executive order, which is quite extraordinary. It says, "By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered, Section 1, Purpose and Policy. It is the policy of the United States and the purpose of this order to protect the religious freedoms of Americans and end the anti-Christian weaponization of government. The founders established a nation in which people were free to practice their faith without fear of discrimination or retaliation by their government." I mean, these are strong words, and clearly this is a huge attack on the Harris-Biden administration, but also going back previously to the Obama administration. Share with us your thoughts on particularly his expression here of the anti-Christian weaponization of government.
Well, again, he's just really calling this stuff out. I mean, the language is extraordinary. It'd be lovely if our politicians used language like that. And I just think, anyway, I won't go off on a tangent, but he's actually named the Biden Department of Justice. I mean, rather like he did at his inaugural speech. They had to sit there and listen to what he was saying. He just took down their record, took down what they'd done. And here he says the Biden Department of Justice sought to squelch faith in the public square by bringing federal criminal charges and obtaining in numerous cases multi-year prison sentences against nearly 24 peaceful pro-life Christians for praying and demonstrating outside abortion facilities. Now, Helen's just mentioned Adam Smith Connor and disgraceful waste of public money, £100,000 to prosecute this man for an offence which for the majority of the population is not an offence. For standing outside an abortion facility. It's quite extraordinary.
Because it's a right to protest.
Yes.
As a democratic
yes.
right.
And he also refers to retaliation by the government. This is what has been seen. That is the weaponization. It is the retaliation by the government against Christians who protested. We've got one of these examples in the, dare I say it, in the New Hart paper. There's a Christian businessman, Russ Salerno. He was fired from his Fortune 500 financial institution because his biblical views clashed with his employer's support of a certain ideology with multiple letters. And he was fired because he said it just isn't proper for anyone to read sex stories to little kids. I mean, in Canada, you've got a pastor and who has been arrested for protesting against the drag queen story hour, And this, but again, you've got an American still being sacked from his company. Now, how much this is going to affect ordinary non-government departments will be another matter. It'll be very interesting to see how, this whole thing, if Trump can effect a change of climate through America.
Okay. And Helen, the Hill publication, which is an excellent online publication that really does report on what's happening on Capitol Hill in the United States, has actually got a very good article about Donald Trump's recent speech that he made at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. And this is what Trump said. He said, "While I'm in the White House, we will protect Christians in our schools, in our military, in our government, in our workplaces, hospitals, and in our public squares." He went on to say, "And we will bring our country back together as one nation under God." I mean, how refreshing is this from President Trump, and how much we need this in this country, restoring God to the heart of government and back to the heart of the nation, which is so badly needed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Simon. And it is absolutely amazing to think that the President of the United States, the most influential nation, is actually professing his faith so publicly. And can you imagine if we had Keir Starmer professing Christian faith? I mean, we know what happened a few years ago, don't we? He went to Jesus' house to say, "Well done, Christians," lots of wonderful social action. A week later, he came under pressure from the media he'd visited a church that was professing traditional Christian values, and he was derided, and he actually apologised to the media and to the nation. "I'm sorry I went to a church that's doing good things I shouldn't have done." Now, that is like how amazing it would be if we had that same situation. And President Trump really is acting in good faith, and I think this shows his sincerity of faith. The fact that his life was put in danger, there were 2 failed assassination attempts, I think has deepened his faith. And when it comes to the laws that we've had unravelled by our politicians in this country, we've had everything from the Sunday trading laws, marriage, we've seen an erosion of parental rights and obviously freedom of speech. And it's not just the laws that have been unravelled, also what we're seeing is words being redefined. And so even at the civil servant level, words are being redefined, given a different meaning. Laws are being interpreted differently based on the different meanings that are being sort of inculcated into the system. So I came across this quite a lot when I was championing Christian relationships and sex education in my children's schools. And time again, I came up against a barrier. Against Christian views being taught to the children when it came to relationships. So the law actually does say that parents should be consulted, and it's very clear, parental views are important, but the word consulted was redefined within the school system to mean that it doesn't mean you ask the parents what they would like their children to be taught. It means that you're going to have a parental consultation and tell the parents what you want their children to learn. And then there was also other things, accessing what the children are being shown. I had to get past this bias by even going through a Freedom of Information Act just to find out what my son was going to be taught in relationship and sex education. This was just before the Education Secretary issued the letter to every school in the country to say the law allows parents to see the information, you should not be preventing them. But it didn't really make that much difference. I actually leaned on that, and I did get to see it eventually. So again, it's not just the law, it's not just an interpretation of the law, it's not just a bias of interpretation, but it's also the public servants who have their own ideas and actually want to interpret it their own way.
Excellent, thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your own personal experience there, Helen. And Melanie, share with us the value of having a presidential commission on kind of religious liberty that will protect Christian freedoms in the US, as Trump has signed another executive order to make the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, his Attorney General, in which she will be called to head up a task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. Would this mean that this new task force would go after the ultra-liberal progressives who have been persecuting Christians in government and government institutions within the United States, purely because they don't accept their own ideology? Is it payback time for them now?
Well, it rather looks like it, because in his executive order he refers to specific instances. He refers to when Catholic churches, charities and pro-life centres were having violence, theft and arson perpetrated against them, which the Biden administration, Department of Justice largely ignored. After more than 100 attacks, the US House of Representatives passed a resolution condemning this and calling on the Biden administration to enforce the law. And then in 2023, the famous example is that the FBI published a memorandum, or they had an in-house memorandum, and they asserted that radical traditionalist Catholics were domestic terrorism threats. We have something similar here when that chaplain Bernard Randall was referred to prevent for talking about traditional marriage in school. And so the FBI suggested infiltrating Catholic churches as threat mitigation. I mean, have they nothing better to do? I know this FBI memorandum was later retracted. And then also the Biden Department of Education sought to repeal religious liberty protections for faith-based organisations on college campuses. Now, and their Equal Employment Opportunity Commission sought to force Christians to affirm radical transgender ideology against their faith. We have exactly the same here. What is so encouraging about what Trump is doing is that he's starting from the top. So this task force, headed by the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, this task force consists of the heads of every other department of the government. So you've got the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. I mean, he's got to be on the task force. The Secretary of the Treasury, Defence, Labour, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Education, Veteran Affairs, Homeland Security, Management and Budget, the UN representative, Small Business Administration, the FBI, President for Domestic Policy, and the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. That department has a very dubious reputation. Chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, so heads of other departments. So they're all going to be on this task force. So it looks like a sort of top-down investigation. So you've got Elon Musk sorting out the government efficiency and where they're wasting public money. And then you've also got this rooting out of anti-Christian bias.
Which is quite incredible, because not many people have actually picked up this story on this executive order, and I think it's a huge, huge news story in the fact that here we see Donald Trump issue an executive order to actually root out the liberal progressive agenda and to restore Christian values right at the heart of his administration in every US Department of Government, which is absolutely extraordinary. And Helen, give us your thoughts in this executive order. It talks about the previous administration of Biden and Harris, and particularly how the US Justice Department under Biden, and Joe Biden is a Catholic himself, and yet that department prosecuted anti-abortion activists. And last month, Donald Trump pardoned 23 individuals who were in prison for blocking access to abortion clinic under the previous administration.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely wonderful news that those Christians have been pardoned, they're back out of prison now. But it's shocking to think how they actually got in there in the first place. And as you say, this all happened under the Biden administration. And from what I can understand, because in the UK we have the buffer zones now, and in the US they have the FACE Act, which stands for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, and anybody that's found to be obstructing those entrances will actually be arrested. So it seems that they've misapplied the law to peaceful protesters. So these older people, these sincere believers, have actually been put in prison for exercising their freedom of expression, which actually is, if there was a higher order, it would be the First Amendment. So they were actually arrested completely wrongly because they were exercising their freedom under the First Amendment, which allows them to do that, to stage these protests outside the clinic. See, I see the same thing exactly as Melanie has just explained. We have the same problem in the UK, and I have a personal experience of when I was praying outside the abortion clinic. You know, this was before the buffer zones. So now obviously we're praying outside the buffer zones, but previously we were exercising our right. We had the right in law to stand there and pray and hand out information. We did not disturb anybody. We would also inform the police in advance that we were going to be there. So it was just a normal day. And what happens is the abortion manager, the clinic manager, she will call the police to say we're there. And the police know we're there because we've told them. The police will come, speak to her in there for half an hour, come out and then speak to us. And the conversation will be something like, we're here, it's our right to be here. We're doing this because this is our legal right to be here and express and to pray. And the police officer would say, yes, I know this is your right, you're allowed to be here. But then I was quite shocked when this young police officer actually wanted me to know that he disagreed with my protest. Now, he's supposed to be impartial, not that anybody can be. Nobody is impartial. As a Christian, we would not be expected to leave our Christianity at the door when we turn up to the office, no. So I don't expect the police officers to leave their beliefs at the door, but they should not bring it into their office work that they're doing. They shouldn't actually be advertising ideas that are antithetical to the Christian view to Christians who are exercising their legal rights. Now, this is how the whole public sector is infiltrated with this idea that there's a right and wrong that an individual can decide themselves and enforce it at their job during their working hours. Now, I was accepting of him. He was accepting of me. Obviously, he couldn't do anything, and that's his view. But the fact that he did not realise that he was speaking out of turn was the most concerning thing.
Oh, incredible, thank you. And Melanie, another area that we see that Donald Trump is addressing is the whole issue of education. And again, the kind of weaponizing of the US Department of Education to actually root out and attack Christians and promote this very progressive liberal agenda under the Biden and Harris administration, and show us how he's wanting to change American education to protect children and giving them more of a kind of godly education, which is in a complete contrast to the past 4 years.
Yes. He actually says that the Biden Department of Education sought to repeal religious liberty protections for faith-based organisations on college campuses. I always remember there was one school who was allowed to sort of start a Satan society or something. They were allowed to meet these children, they were allowed to have that. The Biden Equal Opportunity the Biden Equal Employment Opportunity Commission sought to force Christians to affirm radical transgender ideology against their faith. That's what we just said before. I mean, teachers in this country face the same thing all the time. It's kind of soft power at its worst. It may not be statutory, but there's a pressure to conform, rather like Helen was saying about this policeman. So this stuff this wokery becomes accepted as the new morality, and people think they're saying the right thing and they don't realise they've just been brainwashed. Absolutely. And so the same thing was happening in America, and Trump is calling it out.
Yeah. Helen, share your thoughts on how Trump has actually called out the FBI in particular for actually pursuing Catholic Americans for standing outside of abortion clinics, and then the FBI wanting to infiltrate Catholic churches because they were concerned with their stance and their teaching on marriage and family values, and actually calling them domestic terrorists. Show us how effectively we've seen that the FBI has been politicised to use their powers to attack Christians in the United States.
Yeah, it's absolutely disturbing. I mean, it is very much like if this police officer that had spoken to me, that he disagreed with my protest, if he'd followed me to church and decided that he was going to observe me and observe other people like me about our faith, how we expressed it, and he had a view on whether that was right or wrong, and he was using that to discriminate against us. It's really, really disturbing. The other thing is this memo, the FBI memo that was discovered and accessed by the Republican lawmakers, actually the information on there was based on very discriminatory sources against Christians. So they're not able to evaluate what is real and what is false, what is right and what is wrong. we have the same problem. We need somebody, a strong leader like President Trump, to actually be outspoken according to the Christian values in this country.
Absolutely. And I only got a couple of minutes left of the programme. So Melanie, I just want to know your response to this. This is what Trump has said. He said, "My administration will not tolerate anti-Christian weaponization of government or unlawful conduct targeting Christians. The law protects the freedom of Americans and group of Americans to practice their faith in peace. And my administration will enforce the law and protect these freedoms. My administration will ensure that any lawful and improper conduct, policies or practices that target Christians are identified, terminated and rectified." Strong language from a strong president. Share with us your thoughts as we have 2 minutes left of the programme.
Yes, well, it's amazing, and it's coming from the top down, but he is specifically talking about the government, and one has to pray that this affects every department of government. I mean, when I look at the people on the task force, I think American Christians need to be praying that the task force does meet regularly. It's not just good sounding words, but the Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, is able to get them all together and to actually push through these changes and get them in their departments to identify this stuff, because you've got to change the thinking of thousands of people, and it's influenced by the media, and it has permeated government there, very much so here, and you can only change this through prayer.
Absolutely. And Helen, share with us your thoughts on why politics matters within 30 seconds and how Americans can look to the Trump administration to see how they are restoring godly policies and righteous policies to the heart of the US nation and government.
That's right. I mean, we know from the Bible that when you have righteous policies, when you have righteous leaders, the nation benefits, it prospers, and when you have people who do things antithetically to the Bible, then you're going to have poverty and all kinds of injustices that will come from that.
So Helen and Melanie, thank you so much for being this week's guests on Politics Day. You've both done a great job. And I want to thank you for watching this programme at home. I mean, it's incredibly refreshing that President Donald Trump has issued an executive order to actually protect Christian freedoms and liberties in the US government and its institutions. And we need this here, so we don't stop praying and we don't stop campaigning for it. So thank you for watching Politics Today.